Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching Sit Down. Look who's here. It's Willie Randolph, six-time All-Star, six-time World Series champ. What's up, man? How are you?
I'm great. Good to be with you, DJ.
Well, it's really nice to meet you virtually. You had an amazing baseball career. And, one of the cool things about this pandemic is that people watched old games. They got really into memorabilia. You're working with the folks at Athlete Direct. And I was checking some stuff out. You got a lot of good stuff there on the site. So what was it like to put some of your memorabilia out there for everybody?
Yeah, well, I've been so fortunate, DJ. I've been in baseball for over 4 decades, and I've been and have access to all the greatest players in the game, Hall of Famers, all kind of players. My kids grew up in the ballpark, so over the years we've just accumulated so much stuff, really cool things that at my age I can't take it with me. So I want to share that with the fans. The fans would really love to see some of the stuff that I have, cool things from all these different players and stuff. So all of my own personal collection. And again, like I said, my kids are all older now and they don't really care about that stuff anymore. So I got some cool things to share. So if you're going after these direct, you can check out my locker. And I think you'd be pretty amazed with some of the stuff that I'm featuring on there, whatever. But it's a cool thing. A lot of great athletes, former and present, that are on the website. So it's like a little candy store. And if you love baseball and memorabilia, you should have a good time navigating through all that. It's pretty cool.
We see a bat from the 80s, All-Star Game cleats, a hat from the 90s. You've really collected some cool stuff. Do you have any personal favorites?
Well, not really. All of it's special in a lot of ways, but a lot of the personal stuff with guys that were at All-Star games, guys that I, end up rubbing elbows with, guys that just took cool pictures with me, signed certain things for me or whatever, those kind of things. Nothing really that jumps out at me because it's really a smorgasbord of a lot of different things. It depends on what people want to get into. But it starts from cards to uniforms to game use stuff. There's so many different pieces that again are really cool. And then when you go on the website, you'll look at it, you'll see that it's unique in some ways or whatever. But I'm looking forward to getting this going and also seeing what the other athletes have to offer. Also, Mark Messier, you got Aaron Boone's involved. You got so many great players, some tennis people, some golfers. So it's a really cool website. The brand is starting to get going. And I'm happy to be a part of it. So, but yeah, you'll find some cool pieces on it. The fans will.
It's really incredible, just all the athletes involved. And you mentioned all your decades in baseball. Before we get to everything in the bigs, what are some of your earliest baseball memories as a kid?
Wow, just playing the game from sun up to sundown, DJ. Just loving the game. Growing up in the metropolitan area in New York City, I'm a New Yorker, so playing in the sand lots, just being able to get out there and just play for the love of the game, in the neighborhood. That's what I really miss more than anything, is just being out there with my buddies. You don't see that as much nowadays, unfortunately, but those are my memories of growing up, playing sandlot baseball, stickball, punch ball, stoop ball. We made up any kind of ball, DJ. It was just always, we were ripping and running every day. And that's really how I honed my skills. When I think back on my career, how blessed I've been in my career, DJ, I really owe it to a lot of that early upbringing, playing in the neighborhood, being on different teams, I know things are different now with all the showcasing and the bonds and all the, showcasing and the travel teams and stuff like that. But there's nothing like just getting out there with your buddies and just playing good old fashioned baseball and enjoying the game. So those are my early memories. And then as I grew, just my whole career just been a storybook. And we can get into that a little bit later if you want. But those are things that I hold dear. Just going back to the grassroots and just remembering when the game was really fun and you get out there and just play with your friends and just get better and better.
There's something just really pure and organic about that. You go from the sandlot to one day playing at Yankee Stadium for the Yanks. What do you remember about first walking into Yankee Stadium and being a part of that franchise?
Man, imagine it. 21-year-old kid, grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, walking to storied Yankee Stadium. It was just, even when I'm talking to you, I'm getting goosebumps even talking to you. And you really feel that. Now, the old stadium was more like that than the new stadium. The new stadium is beautiful. I get it. It's pristine, it's gorgeous. But DJ, it's nothing like the old Yankee Stadium. That's where all the ghosts were lurking in the rafters and in the Babe Ruth and all these cats. You almost feel their presence in the building. So when I first walked in that stadium, I just couldn't believe that. First of all, that I finally arrived after being in Pittsburgh for my early years in the minor leagues, and then coming home, playing in front of my hometown fans and all my family and friends, and just being around the great Thurmon Munson and Roy White and Catfish Hunter. I grew up emulating or try to emulate and imitate these guys. And now I'm actually rubbing elbows with them in the same clubhouse with one of the best franchises in history. So Billy Martin's my manager back then, but for me to get indoctrinated into the game with the New York Yankees was nothing better for me. And the fact that we were successful winning in our first 3 years. I was in the World Series, first 3 years in the league. Even though we lost in 76 to the Big Red Machine, we ended up winning 77 and 78 back to back. And doing that in New York City with ticker tape parades and everything, it was just surreal. So when I first walked in, I was just in total awe of the building and just feeling the history, around me, which was very special.
You've been around a lot of great guys in your career. You mentioned Thurmon Munson, who's become really a mythic figure based on his career and unfortunately the early end of his life. But what do you remember about him, and what stood out about him compared to some of the other guys you crossed paths with?
Well, Thurman was the captain. He just commanded that respect. He was the leader of our ball club. So I remember when I first met Thurman, I was a little bit intimidated by him because he was a great guy when you got to know him, but he was very old school, gruff, kind of tough guy, a typical old school catcher, and he was just all business on the field, man, but a great guy. But I just remember Thurman, taking me under his wing. And that was important to me because as a young player, I had a little chip on my shoulder because I'm trying to establish my career, but I had a little bit of that tunnel vision, and he wanted me to relax a little bit. So they needled me, man. They used to get on my case all the time, man, try to loosen me up. At the time, I didn't realize they were trying to loosen me up a little bit, but I was so, gung-ho that one day he kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, man, you know what? We get on you. We need you because you're going to be in this team for a long time. You're part of us now. You're a Yankee. So relax and go out and play. And that was when everything took off for me because he just let me kind of exhale a little bit. I got that from the captain. And once he kind of gave me his blessings, then I was able to relax and play my game. But Thurman was very, very instrumental in my early career also.
I mean, there was a lot put on your shoulders at that point, right? You're playing in multiple World Series as a young guy. You win multiple World Series. What were some of the biggest challenges for those teams? Because as you know, it's not easy to win this thing. To win it multiple times is really special as well.
Yeah. And back then it was starting to formulate the Bronx Zoo. If you remember all those years where it was a total chaos at times, but it was easier for me because again, I was around a very veteran laden team. So I could just kind of go out and play. Now the pressure was there to establish myself and play a very important part on the team as a second baseman, playing defense. I was, in the mix, leading off, hitting second my first couple of years. So I felt the responsibility, but for me, I knew I was good. I just was able to just relax and play. Like I said to you about way Thurman kind of brought me into things. So for me, it was the way baseball was supposed to be. When you're in the playoffs in your first couple of years, it just kind of prepares you for the zoo. It prepares you for all the pressure because you've been in that situation before. I mean, think about that. 21-year-old kid in Yankee Stadium, the biggest stage in the country, and I'm in the World Series 3 years in a row. So that teaching or that experience really set me up for, being able to deal with that kind of stuff. So it's like with Derek Jeter and a lot of these guys that come up, that early experience, we're getting a taste of what it feels like to be in the pressure cooker, to be in a situation where you have to really buckle down and excel. It really is a good teacher for you. And that's why I just look forward to, my Knicks. And my Knicks this year got knocked out, but I thought it was a great experience for my young players to get that experience of being involved in that. So next year they'll be better for it and they'll be better players.
Yeah, that Knicks team was a lot of fun to watch, no question about it. You mentioned great teachers, and Billy Martin maybe had a little bit of a different way in terms of his teaching, but he was certainly effective. For somebody like you who was a player, who managed, what was it about Billy that made him a little bit special in that regard?
Yeah, and Billy was special. He was unique in that, you always felt like when Billy was in the dugout, you had like a 26 guy on your team. He would always try to make a difference. He loved matching wits with the other manager, sometimes to a fault because he would start fights and everything like that. But what I loved about Billy was that, and we needed this at the time at the Yankees because we had some really lean years going into 75, 76. So we had to really establish that murderer's row. We established that old Yankee way of winning. So Billy was the kind of guy, DJ, that he just made you feel like it was you or us against the world. And that's the way we played. We took no prisoners. We fought a lot with the Red Sox and all these different teams. It was the Kansas City, the Red Sox, the Milwaukee Brewers, but he always felt like he was in the bunker with you. And although a lot of guys didn't get along with Billy, Billy wasn't the easiest guy to play for, okay? He was tough. But if you went out and played hard for him every day, DJ, and you were part of the team and you put the team first, Billy would give you the shirt off his back. So for me, albeit for a small period of time, because he was self-destruct with the alcohol and stuff like that later on, unfortunately. But when Billy was at his best, you know, he was the best manager for me because he really made you feel like you were a team and that we're going to go out there and kick butt and take no prisoners. And as a player, you like that attitude on the team where, you know, we go out every day. It's different now. I mean, now back in the day, we were really, you know, we didn't fraternize much. There wasn't a lot of like, you know, slapping fives with the other team. We were serious about things. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. But Billy always made you feel like he had your back and that as a team, we're going to go out there and beat you every day.
So you bounced around to a bunch of different ball clubs. You had good times in LA. You played with the Brewers. You played with the Mets. No Gold Gloves, though, man. I mean, how did you not get any shine for your defense after all those years?
Oh, I know you're gonna bring that up, DJ. Come on, man. You know what? But that is one of the things that I really regret not getting. I thought I was always on the top of the list and turning double plays and playing defense. We won championships, but I tell a little story all the time with Frank White, who won a bunch of them, Lou Whitaker, Bobby Grich with Baltimore. I always tell those guys all the time, I said, what would you rather have, the gold or the diamonds? And I would always show my rings to these guys, and Frank White would always get mad at me and go, you son of a gun. He said, you're a I said, I'd rather have the diamonds than the gold. But to tell you the truth, that I wish I would have had one of those on my mantle, because I know there were years where I led all second basemen in defensive categories, but again, you know, we had some great second basemen back in the day. So the fact that I didn't win one, I'd rather take a silver bat or the World Series rings than the Gold Glove. But I'm not gonna lie about it. I do wish that I won one or two, because I took a lot of pride in my defense. I think, without, you know, bragging, I think I'm like second or third all time in baseball history turning double plays. So I took a lot of pride in my defense, and it would have been really, really cool to display one of those Gold Gloves on my mantle.
Yeah, I think you deserve one. I think that was a mistake by a lot of different voters back then. But you had a great career. And like you said, you got the rings. And the other chapters of your career are so interesting, too, because after playing for the Yanks, you come and coach with Joe Torre and obviously the Core Four and Jeter and everybody. What do you remember about those early days? You first come to the mix, you get to know Torre, you see Jeter. What stands out about how that team was built before it became that huge dynasty?
Yeah, excellent question. Actually, you start before Joe. I was with Buck Showalter in 94, 95. And so we had already started to lay the foundation. Gene Michaels, God bless him, he's gone, of course. He was really the architect of that team. He, along with Bob Watson, who came later, but Gene Michael was the one that really put this team, set this team on the path from, you know, the early 90s into, you know, the dynasty that we built in the mid 90s. But, I started out with Showalter. You know, he kind of laid the foundation. Unfortunately, we lost that big series in 95 to the Indians, and then George let Showalter go. Now, some people might think that was a mistake, you know, but when you look at what happened with Torre, it was a genius move. But I thought Buck was a guy that could have led us moving forward. But then I came into the fold from Showalter. I transitioned to Torre and that staff with Chris Chambliss and Don Zimmer, Mel Stottlemyre, Cardinal and those guys. We had a great staff. And that was when things started to really take off for us, obviously. You know, we learned from 95, then the Jeter and the core, I'd say the core five, because Bernie was, man, Bernie was the guy really for the most part, but they always talk about the core four. But when we got that team together and we brought in guys like O'Neill and Tino and those cats, that really just solidified an unbelievable team. I've been on some great teams, DJ, but that team, although I was a coach, that 98 team, those teams around that time, those were consummate professionals who knew how to play, knew how to win, knew how to cut your heart out if we had to, but we just played the game the right way. So for me, I was fortunate that when I retired in 92, I was able to transition only a year or two later into coaching, then I got the opportunity with Showalter, like I said, and then was blessed enough to, when he left, I was able to stay with the team and get on that long run with Torre, who's a Hall of Fame manager. So again, I was talking about my career as being so blessed and fortunate. And that was the start of my second career, which really paralleled in some ways was just as exciting as my playing career. I had a great time as a coach, and then later on, obviously, as a manager for the Mets.
You mentioned those teams. 98, one of the all-time great teams. What was most underrated about those Yankee teams that you got to coach there?
I think our defense, we caught the ball. We really did. A lot of times people focused on our offensive approach, and then we had some really great players, but we had pitching that would always keep us in the game, and our bullpen was lights out. With Mariano at the end, you got Mendoza and Stanton and all these guys. We had a nice nucleus, Graham Lloyd, Jeff Nelson, and it was all set up. And all we had to do was get the lead, catch the ball, play good defense. And again, like I said, we had a lot of guys come through the pike, but they all understood the importance of catching the ball, playing defense, and it just made us a better team.
So you mentioned your managerial opportunity. I'm a lifelong Mets fan, so you come to the franchise in '05. It had been some rough years there after the World Series run in 2000. What was the best part about taking over as Mets manager?
Oh, man. Geez, what can you say, man? A kid growing up in Brownsville, Brooklyn. I was a Met fan also. People look at me mostly as a Yankee, but I have as much Met blood in me as a Yankee. I grew up when the Mets won in 1969. My friends and I were dancing in the streets. We went crazy. They beat the mighty Orioles. We could not believe that the underdog team actually won that series. So that's when I really got hooked on baseball, where I just couldn't get enough of it. So I just remember those early days of as being in a position where I was honing my skills and get ready for the big leagues. But when I got the Met job, I mean, geez, well, what can you say? I mean, it's like a dream come true. And then the fact that we were able to turn the team around so quickly, like you said, there were some lean years there, but we turned it around. We knocked the Braves off their perch after 13 years of dominance, I think they had, 13 years, I believe. So we knocked the Braves off their perches. So we took over the division, and then obviously got one pitch for going to the World Series in '06. Obviously, the big disappointment was '07. But for me, to be a kid that grew up in New York, rooting for the Mets, having a feel for the city, when I walk around, people, Met fans were excited again. They were proud again. They felt like they had a piece of the city from the Yankees. So to be a part of that resurgence and that renaissance was really, really cool. And, it ended for me a little too quick, but I still will never trade the honor and the privilege of managing the team that I rooted for and almost got us to World Series. And I played for the Mets. My last year in the league was 1992, but played for the Mets. So again, the best of both worlds. I mean, captain of the Yankees, all the world championships. And again, I'm not bragging. When I talk about this stuff, it's because I'm blessed, and I like to always give praise to God for me being in the position that I'm in. And I never take it for granted, because I've had a beautiful, beautiful career, and hopefully more to come.
The 2006 team was so talented. Did you know that team had a chance at the division? Because it was Young Reyes, Wright, Beltran, Delgado. Did you guys have those expectations, or did it even blow your mind that the team was that good at that point?
No, we had high expectations. After '05, we kind of lit the candle, and we knew that, we can incorporate those young players like David and Jose in the mix, that we had a chance. Because I love speed. Jose, and both of them, David was a 30-30 guy, man. So we had two of our young core players who were outstanding players, but they played every aspect of the game. And that's very rare to have like 5 tool guys like that at that young age. So for me, we knew that we had a chance to really make some noise, because we had the confidence going. Omar went out and got some really nice free agent signings with Pedro. Although he was hurt a lot here and there, but we had a nice mix of guys that stepped in. And we had El Duque, who came in and did a good job for us. So no, we expected to win. We knew that the stakes were moving forward, and that if we could just continue just to keep the confidence going and play our game, that we were going to compete and win. No, there was no doubt that we felt really good about our chances to be a good team.
What kills you the most about that season? Because so many people focus on the series with the Cardinals in Game 7, but what do you think about all these years later? Because there's a lot to dissect still all this time later.
Yeah, there's a few things that jump out at me. First of all, I mean, and again, this is not an excuse thing, because baseball injuries are part of the game. But we did have a lot of unfortunate injuries on the stretch, where some of my main guys just couldn't answer the bell. And that's part of baseball. That's part of it. I get it. Morse Lou got hurt. He was my leader. Pedro had issues. We had a lot of issues with injuries, but that's part of it. We just couldn't, get over the hump. The baseball gods sometimes can be cruel. We all know that. But there's no reason to complain about that, because you've been around the game long enough. That happens. But and then for me, what I think about a lot of times, the way things ended, a lot of times, I hear people give Carlos Beltran a little heat for taking that third strike. I feel bad about that, because this guy was my best player. I think he's still a Hall of Famer. He was in a tough spot there, and that's the way it ended. I mean, Wayne Wright threw him a hellacious curveball that fell off the table, and that's the way it happened or whatever. So I think back on that year, the disappointment of not getting to the promised land, but the fact that we left it all out in the field, even when we were down at times, and sometimes you go into slumps, sometimes you go into little injury situations, but for the most part, I'm proud of that team, because we really played our butts off for the city of New York. And although we were short at times, we never made excuses, and we went out and played the game. So there's a lot of fun memories, a lot of things I could talk about as far as that team. But more than anything, I've never been prouder of a team that I've ever been on. I've been in baseball for 4 decades.
And there's a lot of challenges that come along the way, right? You lose a game 7. The next year, the team is still really good, but the '07 finish was a bummer, right? Losing 7 and 17. I mean, what were some of the biggest challenges that moment? Now that you have the space to kind of breathe and look at it, I mean, what happens to a team like that when you just get in a rut and you end the season losing all those games?
Yeah. It's just it makes it a tough winter, obviously. But we knew we had to regroup. We knew we were gonna make our team better and go out and put some pieces together. But it's just when you get that close and when you really feel like you got it, and it kind of pulled away from you, whatever, you want to continue to get back there again. And that's what's so disappointing for me is that, okay, the way things ended to me weren't very, it didn't work out too well. But I just wish that we should have been able to push through that and keep that team together, the same coaching staff. I think we could have regrouped, because at the time it was early May when I got fired, and we were starting to play better, actually. And I thought that we were going to, get ourselves together and really finish up strong, but it didn't happen. But the bottom line for me is that I thought that team was on a nice, progression, and it's just that we weren't able to finish it for whatever reason. But I wouldn't change it for the world. It was, again, some of the best times I've ever had in the game. And you can play, you can coach, but when you manage, it's a different feel. It's like those are your kids, though. Those are your babies, and you want to nurture them. You want to see them do well. So it was manager, but gratifying in a different way when you win, because when you win, you see all the hard work and you see what the guys put into it. It's a feeling you really can't describe.
One of the bummers when I think about your career is that you didn't get to manage again. And you had 3 seasons that you had a record over 500. The Mets got better in those first 2 seasons. I know you were close on some other gigs, and I'm sure you've thought about it. Why do you think you didn't get another opportunity to manage?
That's an excellent question, and I don't know. I don't know, DJ. I've lost enough sleep over that, trying to figure out why. I guess you have to ask the powers that be, but yeah, it's very disappointing that I didn't get another shot to, again, continues to grow. And that's really what it was about for me, because I was a young manager. People forget that was my first time doing this. And as a young manager, you make mistakes, things you might regret, but you do learn from them. And I just feel bad that I wasn't able to continue to learn and get better, because I know that I was on the right path to being a decent manager. I've already proven that. So again, I don't think much about why anymore. It's very disappointing, to be honest with you. But that's the game. I mean, there's a lot of managers that don't get second shots. There are a lot of guys that things don't work out for whatever reason. But I just feel like, for me, it was more about being part of a legacy. As the first African-American manager in New York history, I felt like I was carrying a torch, more or less, in my mind, going back to my hero, my idol, Jackie Robinson, to another idol of mine, Frank Robinson. I felt like there's not many minority managers in the game. So when you have the few that are there, we have to sustain, and we have to show that we're way more than capable of doing the job, but also that you can be an inspiration to guys coming behind you. There were a lot of young managers, the Bo Porters of the world, and I can name a lot of other African-American coaches who didn't get an opportunity, but I wanted to be an inspiration to them and show them that, you can do it also, but also be a teacher and a mentor to them as they grew. So for me, what sticks in my craw more than anything is I didn't get a chance to really be a part of that lineage or legacy, and be an inspiration to a lot of the guys who come up behind me.
Well, you hope to turn around the Mets. That's something that you should be proud of. Yeah. That's not something that a lot of managers could say, that's for sure. And guess what? You've been able to impact people in different ways. Now, I went to Fordham University. I know your daughter went there too. I know you gave the commencement speech one year. Is it true that you gave the speech and then managed the same day?
That's right. And we won the game too, which is even more special. I had a double header, DJ, and it was what I won the most. It was an unbelievable day. Can you imagine that? I got my baby girl. She's graduating from Fordham in 4 years, and you know what? That was the most nervous I've ever been in my life. Now, people, what do you mean? You've been in World Series, Game 7s, bases loaded. I tell you what, I worked on my speech for a long time, and I was so nervous, man. But I got through it, and I hope that I inspired those kids, because we had a great group that day. It was a beautiful day. But yes, I went from Fordham campus right to the ballpark for a night game. And thank goodness we won, man, because that day I was drained physically, because it was one of the best days of my life, because to look into my baby girl's eyes and see her graduate from college, just doesn't get any better than that.
Well, you've had some amazing stories along the way. Willie, really nice to meet you, man. Thanks so much for the time, and we'll talk to you down the road. All right.
DJ, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on the show, man. Take care.